Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Locker Room Chat, brought to you by the Shanneman Sports Museum of Tacoma, Pierce County, and Rainier Asphalt and Concrete, the #1 asphalt and concrete repair contractor in the Tacoma and Seattle areas. For quality workmanship and top-notch customer service, contact Rainier Asphalt and Concrete at www.rainierasphalt.com and let them know that you heard about them on the Locker Room Chat. I'm Steve Thomas, your host today. And we're so excited to have as our guest for part 2 of our conversation with Washington State Sports Hall of Fame trainer, Gary Nicholson. Gary, in our first opening segment, we talked a little bit about your move from College of Idaho into sports medicine, sports training, and your move up in the minor leagues first in baseball at Caldwell and eventually with the Tacoma Cubs and on to the Chicago Cubs of Major League Baseball. And then about your transition to the Puget Sound area again, coming back this way when you got a call from Jim Kittlesby, the former assistant athletic director and sports information director of Pacific Lutheran University, to come back and be the trainer for PLU. Tell us about that move back to this area, I guess back to the Northwest.
Well, as I mentioned before, that I wanted to be back in the Northwest, and that it had nothing to do with the Chicago Cubs itself. I mean, they have been great. In fact, when I applied for the job here in Seattle and they found out about it, we got into they offered money and more money, and I refused. They offered more money, and I refused. The head, there was going to be a new general manager in Chicago, and his name was Bob Kennedy. And Bob Kennedy, I had known him when I was in Caldwell and further, and he said he really wanted to keep me there, but he understood the Northwest and the mountains and everything else, and so we did come out here with the college, and I would come out and I would be here at probably the last week of September with football, and then I would leave about the first of March. So I would be with basically most of football and basketball for PLU. I also knew through Jim and everything else that Seattle was going to get a baseball team, and eventually. We looked at this would keep us, we wouldn't have to do so much traveling. If you stop to think, the first 13 years of, after I got married and so forth, we lived in 23 different places.
Oh my.
When you stop to think of, we lived in an apartment in spring training. We would go back to Chicago. That was a place. We'd come back, came back here. We did that thing, and so you kind of really want to be in one place. We should have been in Chicago, but again, that was another story. So Lou Gorman was the general manager of the Seattle Mariners, and I knew him and knew some other contacts and so forth, and came out here, got the job with the Mariners. And it was a good job, just for the fact that they didn't have any money. They had 6 owners that had equal ownership. And if you ever sat in a meeting with 6 owners, you never got, there was never a 4-2 or anything like that. It was always a 3-3.
Oh boy.
And I remember with the Mariners, Danny Kaye was one of the owners. He was unbelievable. He was a lot of fun, and he was in the locker room a lot. He would go and come into the locker room, and he would have this long stick with a string on the end of it with a tennis ball. He'd walk up to a ball player and he says, "I'm going to teach you how to go and hit today." And he'd hold that out in front of him, and just as the kid would have, ball player would have a bat, and he would swing, and Danny would yank it up and so forth. And there was those types of things. But so you had some different types of personalities, and one of the things was interesting. So anyway, uh, got to when we were, give me, I'll go back. I'm sorry to kind of wander here, but Danny Kaye, they were talking about uniform colors, and Danny Kaye wanted the colors like Arizona State, the maroon and gold,
Right, right.
and he had them all convinced and so forth. And he left in October the first year, and went back for UNICEF. He was very strong in UNICEF with the United Nations. Well, while he was gone, they voted again, and they voted for the blue that they went with.
Mm.
And so he came back, and oh, I was up in the getting things ready in the new training room and everything else, and he came in and he says, "What happened? Well, you were in the meetings?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Well, what happened? How come?" And I said, "Well," I said, "Yeah." I said, "One of the owners was with the Bon Marché, and he said they sold a lot of blue." And another one said, well, his wife liked blue, and another one said he liked the blue waters and so forth. And so that's how we got the blue uniforms for the crazy
That's,
things like that.
oh man, that's it. And I guess that's kind of indicative too, Gary. You know, you're coming, for you must have been an interesting transition. You come from one of the oldest, most established, most cherished franchises in Major League Baseball, the Chicago Cubs, and all of a sudden you're in Seattle. Now there's a lot of excitement here, but on the other hand, there's not a lot of experience, nor is there a lot of success.
Well, and there's not a lot of, when I say a lot of tradition,
Yeah.
the only major league tradition they had was with 1 year of the Seattle Pilots.
Right.
And that was a quick move for them out of town and so forth. So there wasn't that tradition. Danny Kaye made the comment that when they sold the team and left, he came in and really apologized for having to sell the team. And he said my goal was to go and want to have a team like the Dodgers. He was a Dodger fan, and he says what we should have done. He says I should have bought the team completely. He says, and then we would have done, but he says it just didn't work out. He says, and the other guys wanted to, and he says wanted to sell, and so he says I just was forced to do that.
Yeah.
And but he was he would come in, as I say, and he loved to talk. And the other thing was interesting. While he was the part owner, we saw a lot of Hollywood people when we would go to California. We would have just different people that would come into the ballpark. We had that with Leo too when I was in Chicago. I can remember we had Leo knew a lot of them there. We had Sammy Davis.
Yeah.
I had Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
Some of those guys coming into the locker rooms. And so it would just, you never knew who was going to pop up and be in there. So, and then in Seattle, it was like that too. But then when Danny sold it, it was just
when you got to Seattle and you're with this new franchise, there were some, there were a few old school guys. I guess the skipper, Daryl Johnston, I guess at that time was kind of an old school type of guy. Then you had the young players who were around, like Rupert Jones and Danny Meyer and some of those guys. So obviously there was some breaking in and getting this franchise off the ground is always difficult, but it was excitement. It was fun. People were excited about. I mean, this is the newest major league franchise, with the exception of the Sonics. This was it. Seattle had never really seen Major League Baseball other than that one season with the Pilots.
Well, and that was in a stadium too that was old, and this one was something unique with the dome, and also it was compared to the Astrodome down
Yes.
in Houston. I mean, one of the things about the dome, I mean, it wasn't most baseball oriented on the inside, but at least you knew when you went to the ballpark you were going to play. It wasn't going to rain inside.
Right. Right.
It just so it was that, and well, like you say, Wes Stock, who is lives in up here in this area, was the pitching coach, and we had Veda Penson, and we had some
Yes.
other interesting people. There was I don't know if you realize, but we had what the color person for a while with with the Mariners was Killebrew, who had been with
Yeah, Harmon Killebrew, right?
Killebrew, yeah. He had been with the Minnesota Twins and so forth, and he was up here, and and I knew him from he was in Payette, Idaho. That was his hometown, so there's a kind of connection again there, and so there was. You got to stop and think that we were an expansion team, and therefore the players were really basically AAA players. We had we had several that had played in the major leagues, but wasn't really stars in the major league.
And for you, Gary, now from 1976 through 1982, you were with the Mariners. You made the transition again now to becoming a full-time employee at Pacific Lutheran University, 1982, 1983, and making that transition to no more, late nights on the road, not as many trips out of town, all those types of things. I imagine that after many, many years in baseball, probably wore on you a little bit, and getting a chance to spend all your time in one spot was pretty attractive.
Right, and that was one of the main reasons why, again, I got out of baseball. I realized that I wasn't able to go and see any of my kids' activities in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
You're not able to go and do celebrate with the family of the 4th of July, or even with your doing things with your extended family, your parents, your brother, my brother, and so forth. I didn't get to see weddings and that types of things. So I decided it was something else. I mean, I could have stayed. If I would have stayed one more year with the Mariners, I would have had to have given up PLU, because they were going to require the trainer to be full-time year-round, and I would have gotten paid accordingly, but I would still been doing a lot of travel.
Well, you would go on to put in 38 years at Pacific Lutheran University, and boy, there were some great times during those years at PLU. You working with guys like Dr. Dave Olson, Jim Kittlesby, Paul Hosef, many others. There were, Frosty Westring we'll talk about here more in just a moment, but there were some great personalities and some great times at PLU.
Right, and it was, and the people at that time, it was a family. We did the athletic department. You would go and do things together. You would have, we would have picnics in the summer together, and you'd do special things at Christmas time and those things. And if you had a problem or you needed help, there was always that group of people and so forth. And even Gary Chase was there. He was the swimming coach in the very beginning, and then Jim Johnson took over, and just a lot of the different people. And so it was kind of the start of a tradition and so forth. There, they started adding sports that wrestling became a varsity sport, soccer became a varsity sport, and soccer, so it was just it was a building time, and it was also starting to be a time where some of these teams started to win and started to have national championships.
And that's when you and I first kind of crossed paths, and this is a few years back, more than 40 years ago now. But you and I first crossed paths back in the late 70s, and in particular, I guess, with the football and basketball teams. But at that time, Frosty Westring, who we mentioned, had been there about 5 years or so, and all of a sudden, this team is starting to have some success. They're starting to get some recognition. They're starting to get better players. They're starting to move on to national championships. At that time, it was NAIA, but there was a feeling of a real excitement around the program at that time.
Yeah, and the unique thing at that time too. Again, we played in the Tacoma Dome, which is something that a lot of NAIA schools didn't get a chance to do, and so forth. And I can remember playing in the Tacoma Dome against UPS and having, what was it, 15,000 people? I mean, that was unbelievable. And playing the Linfield in the Dome, you'd have a huge crowd. And just, I was with the football team from '73 through all of Frosty's career there and beyond. And it was just, I think every year we were in the playoffs. We may not have made the national final one, but we were in the playoffs of some level and so forth. And that's a good recruiting tool. And
it really is, Gary. And you're talking about that era, and I guess working with one of the icons in local sports in Frosty Westring. This is a guy that I know had a huge impact on my life personally, and I know that he did on yours also. He was a motivator unlike any other.
Yeah, and it was unbelievable. We played when we played back for Division III playoffs, and then we also played down in
Georgetown, Kentucky. Yeah.
Okay. The players, we played both of those times, and that was almost at Christmas time. And Georgetown there was snow. Well, the guys and so forth, they would get to singing, and this is something you wouldn't think about. And they always had to sing Frosty the Snowman.
Yes.
And he could, as I say, and he always had this toolbox and so forth that he used, that he would take out some item out of that toolbox to go and talk to them about. One of the things I always remember, the players would come into the locker room or in the training room, and the first time they did it, I wasn't sure what was going on, but they had a sponge and an ace wrap. And they said, well, we're supposed to give this to you when we don't need it anymore. And I said, well, why are you using it? And they said, well, Frosty says if we put this sponge on our leg where we've got our injury, we wrap it with the ace wrap, when we walk, the sponge massages it and it'll get better quicker. And I said, okay. And I took it, and I could have gone and talked to Frosty and so forth and said, hey, don't do this and so forth. So I'd save up a box of those and take them back to him, and we'll go back and forth. And he would just, but he was unbelievable. The other thing which he was good at, and they didn't realize this until after he retired, he was their best recruiter. He would go out into the high schools after the football season was over with, and be the guest speaker at their end of the year banquets. And he would speak, and he always had the one where he would go and you put the spoon on your nose and so forth, and to see if you could keep it on the nose.
Right.
He would do that. Excuse me. And but at the end of that evening, he would have half that team that he was talking to wanting to come to PLU. Once he was no longer the football coach there, we lost that. And the coaches couldn't understand why we weren't getting the kids like we did. And we finally convinced them that they had to go out and talk like that, but nobody could talk like Frosty.
You had so many personal connections with people through the years, and I know that being the head trainer at PLU has meant an awful lot to you, Gary. It kind of helped too that the profession itself has really undergone some transition since the time that, you know, you started obviously with baseball, but from the early 80s on until you retired in 2011, there were some great strides in sports medicine, sports training, how you went about your daily job, and the people that you had working for you. It became more than just a one-person profession as far as PLU was concerned.
Yeah, when I first started, um, you weren't required to, well, before I started and so forth in athletic training, you weren't required to have a degree. You just was, it was the person that was, could, in baseball, could massage the shoulders and stretch the arms and that type of thing. They tell the story that in Chicago that the trainer there and so forth was massaging one of the pitchers and so forth, and he reached back over behind him and put some stuff on the pitcher's shoulder and was massaging it and so forth. And he realized all of a sudden he had picked up a bottle of Pepsi-Cola and massaged that. Well, the pitcher went out and won. So you know what they had to do the next time.
Superstitions, yeah.
So it was, the guys did a great job for what they did, but they didn't know a whole lot about rehab and about some other things. And they didn't know, a lot of trainers got involved with giving players drugs, amphetamines, that type of thing. I got out of baseball before they started having problems with steroids and everything. So but then the trainers got together and made an association and had, they ended up with having certification. And I was one of the first people, by being back in the Midwest and so forth with such schools as Purdue and Notre Dame and all those types of things. Those were really strong schools and had great trainers. And so we started the association and started, then you could get a degree in it and take the tests and so forth. And then PLU, and so we started in '73 and it lasted until 2003. We could have an internship program, and the kids could go and take, they had to take certain classes, be in the training room for 1,800 hours, and then they could sit for the tests. And I had 83 kids come through the program. Wow. And became trainers.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that was one of the differences. Now they're pushing to go and you have to have a doctorate. And so I would not want to go back and take the test right now because I don't know whether I would pass it. Well, it's just more technical.
But you've been a huge part of having so many successful people come through your program. In fact, one of the people who's now the interim athletic director was a disciple of Gary Nicholson some 20 years ago, Jen Thomas.
Right. And I was able to talk Paul Hoseth into, talk to Dave Wilson first, and then Paul helped along a little later. She started out as an assistant part-time, and then she became full-time. And then just before she moved on up to being assistant athletic director, we hired another person. So we had 3 trainers, where before I was just by myself, but I had a lot of good student trainers. And that internship program made a lot of difference. Now they've got students that work there, but they're not allowed to do a lot of things that we were able to do earlier.
Gary, you were appropriately inducted into the Washington State Trainers Hall of Fame back in 2006. I know that was a high honor for you, something that's certainly well-deserved, and I know you appreciate that.
Yes, I really, trainers don't get very much recognition. You get recognition through maybe the school you went to might induct you, or you might be inducted into the district or into the national NATA Hall of Fame. But a state, this one here was a great honor and so forth. One of the things that I really wished out of that and so forth is that right after that was that we lost the museum in the dome. And I think Tacoma needs a museum, not a baseball one or a football one, but a sports museum.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, I know when you retired in 2011, that didn't mean the end of your career by any means, because you've still been involved in football the last several years. You also have been part of the pro rodeo circuit. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'd started with the pro rodeo circuit while I was still at POU. One of my students who had studied under me and became certified got involved. He was from Idaho, and he got involved with Justin Boot Sports Medicine. Justin Boot Sports Medicine has taken the United States and divided it into 8 areas, and that 8 areas they have a big what you'd call an 18-wheeler a trailer that if you looked on the inside of it, it would look exactly like a physical therapy clinic or in a doctor's office. And it's completely outfitted. I mean, you got all the equipment you'd want, and it's got a special area. You've got stuff that a team doctor could just walk in and use, like cortisone for shots and everything else. And our area here is Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and a little bit of Montana. And so that travels. And I got started and basically worked in the area. Initially got some people involved over in Ellensburg, and got a trainer involved down in Yakima. Recommended some people over in Idaho in 2 different places. And then I was worked in Bremerton and here in Tacoma with the rodeos.
And I know, you talk about pro rodeo, you think about athletes and about the injuries that they suffer in whatever sport. Yeah, there are some really tough dudes and some tough gals in pro rodeo. I mean, they are out there and they suffer some injuries and have to have rehab that's just almost unlike any other sport.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The rodeo athletes, they're different. When I say they're different and so forth, almost all of them come from small communities. A lot of them are involved with rodeos, maybe in high school or in college someplace, and which is really again different. And I had here in Tacoma had a bull rider, and he was at the very end of the week. He had won on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and then so the Sundays was the championship, and he was the last rider, and the bull bucked him off, and then when he landed on the ground, the bull came back down, and the 2 front feet of the bull landed on his hip, and you could hear the femur, the big bone up, you could hear it snap. And I was just outside the chute. We went out and we got to him, and the first question he asked and so forth was, "Do you think I'm going to be ready to ride in the Nationals in November?" And I said, "That's not our decision." So we took him back in, sent him up to Good Samaritan in Puyallup, and the doctor, they put a pin in, a long rod, in his femur, and I saw him the next day, and I walked in and he said, "Mr. Nicholson, can I ride again?" And I said, "Yeah, you'll be able to ride again." And he says, "Oh, but no, can I ride in November?" And I said, "That's up to the doctor." Well, November, he was from Texas. November, I'm watching the finals guess who was out there?
Yeah.
And the
It's
next year when one of the first rodeos I covered, guess who comes walking into the trailer and so forth? He says, "Mr. Nicholson, I made it." And
Those guys.
that's very typical of them. The other thing that's typical of them, of the rodeo guys, is that they don't make real big money. Although if you can make it, like if you can survive the whole rodeo here at Tacoma, they could probably make about 29,000 if they won everything.
Jeez.
And so there's that. But what's the other thing that's interesting with them is the fact that that money usually will. I've asked a couple of them, what are you going to do with your winnings and so forth? Well, it's going to make the payment on the ranch for Dad this year, or we need to go and get a baler or something like that. It's that type of thing, and not what you hear in baseball or football or anything else. And,
right. Yeah. It all goes back home and that type of thing. Hey, Gary, we are out of time, but I'll tell you, it's been a pleasure for me to be your friend for many years, and to kind of take a look back at your 50 plus years in the sports medicine field. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Well, Steve, it's been a lot of fun just talking with you, and it was a lot of fun just being in the vans with you and going up at halftime sometimes and talking with you, and just seeing you and talking with you. I really appreciated all those years with you.
Well, we appreciate those interviews and all those late night bus rides home. It's been fun. That concludes today's presentation. On behalf of Rainier Asphalt and Concrete and the Shanneman Sports Museum of Tacoma Pierce County, we once again like to thank our special guest, Gary Nicholson. I'm Steve Thomas, and we thank you for joining us on another edition of the Locker Room Chat.